Come join us each week as we dive into topics about the joys and the struggles of motherhood. By no means are we experts. We're practically flying by the seat of our pants, or should I say, mom jeans. On this podcast, you will find a judgment-free zone where we discuss not only the best parts of being a mom, but the not-so-glamorous parts too. You can expect unfiltered, real mom talk, humor, grace, and a sense of sisterhood. What makes our podcast unique is that we understand there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to being a mother. We're not going to pretend that we know everything too, because we definitely don't. We just want a place to share our stories with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood.
Today, we're diving into the thrilling final trimester of pregnancy. So get ready to navigate the last chapter of this wild journey with us. The third trimester is a roller coaster, which you'll hear today, of emotions, surprises, and definitely a few sleepless nights. And from week 27 onward, it's all about counting down the days until you finally get to meet baby. So we're tackling it in 3 different groups again. So we're starting with the first topic of preparing for birth. So from prenatal classes to birth plans, we're delving all the way to how you can gear up for the big day. And then it's about preparing for baby. And we're talking about baby names, how to nest, and setting up the nursery. And then finally, it's about the final countdown. So from the due date to the agony of the waiting game and the darn pregnancy symptoms like Braxton Hicks and lightning crotch, which is an actual thing. And we're here to celebrate and commiserate that with you. So we'll chat all things third trimester up until the moment we go into labor, because that's for the next episodes to come, which is all about our birth stories. So let's get started. So first off, let's start with how is everybody's week going? And Leah, I thought I'd maybe start with you this week and just, kind of a big day. Yesterday was the day that your podcast called 99 Problems and IVF is One was released. It was a really open story of your journey. And I'm just curious how you're feeling about that being out there and being released. And what are your thoughts?
Lisa asked me Monday night before it went live how I was feeling. And I was completely sick to my stomach. It's not normal for me to be that vulnerable, especially in a public forum. Kind of sharing that story with, the world. I mean, however many people listen to it, I don't know what that will end up being. I don't know what our reach will end up being. But the fact that even one person I don't know has probably listened to it is sensitive to me. It's been weighing on me a lot, especially with, some of the recent events that have been going on. I think IVF has been under a big spotlight the last couple of weeks. And so therefore it's been on a big spotlight in my life as well. Stephen got home today and he was like, all right, so I was listening to your episode and I said, if you have anything negative to say, don't, because I've listened to it a couple times and it makes me uncomfortable, but I'm glad that I've shared it. He left tonight to go hang out with some of his friends and he texted me. He's like, well, I'm driving and I'm a weeping willow, which is one of our favorite songs right now. So
that's sweet.
To have his support in that has been really nice. I'm not here to educate anybody on anything, but I am here to be a support for anybody. So I do hope that if somebody has listened to it and it's had an impact on their life, or if they're struggling or anything, that I can just open that for anyone to reach out to me, and I will do my best to be an empathetic ear.
And speaking from a good, not knowing Leah well and us becoming friends as it went on, she's always been a fantastic support system. Like I said, she's the most researched person I know. So, and I mean that in the, she's so informed. She means it when she says, reach out to her, and she wants to help you. So please feel free to reach out at hello@momjeansthepodcast.com or on social media.
And then milestone number 2 of the week, your son's turning 1. How you feeling about that?
I know. On Saturday, my best friend from high school texted me and said, "What are you doing for decorations? Like, how can I help you set up for his little birthday barbecue? Nothing too crazy at our house this weekend." I was like, "Oh, I don't have any decorations. We're not doing anything." And then I decided to log on Amazon, and there were 5 boxes that showed up yesterday. There's one more coming tomorrow.
Whoops.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe that we're all at that stage. Michelle, Danielle, Cece and Weston are not far behind. It's been absolutely wild to try and wrap my head around it. It's been so much fun. Yeah, it's weird. Right now, I bought a banner for like a background for some pictures for the barbecue. It's entirely way too big. I don't know that it'll fit on any wall in my house. And I have it laying next to me right now trying to get the wrinkles out, and it just kind of like smells like that fake cheap plastic. Sorry to my mother and father-in-law who sleep in this room starting tomorrow, because hopefully it doesn't still smell like this.
We're excited to celebrate him and you, because the first year I think is a lot about us. Lisa, how's your week going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a realization moment with Aubrey because we are attempting to break her out of the swaddle. Just trying to prep for her turning over, and we'd hate for her to turn over and have her arms trapped. So we're working on trying to break her out of the swaddle, and she is not a fan of that. She likes her swaddle, and then she hates her swaddle, and then she likes her swaddle. So it's very hard, and I keep thinking like, man, this is so hard, and are we ever going to get through this? And I forget, like, going back thinking about Hannah and some of the things we did, and it felt like that stage was never going to end. And then when you look back at it now, you're like, that was such a blip on the radar. It was what, a week, 2 weeks of doing that in the scheme of a year. And so we're just trying to kind of tell ourselves that this is temporary, it's not going to be forever, and really learn about that. So that's Aubrey. It feels like it's going so fast, but I was telling Brandon, I'm excited to watch her grow up and see her and her personality and how different her personality is from Hannah. Like, I've been looking back at videos from Hannah at the same age as Aubrey is now, just to kind of see what it was like. And it's already, there are things that are so similar, like how they are discovering their tongues. And it's so weird when you're like watching them protrude their tongue out. You're like, are you okay? Like, what's happening? Aubrey has a permanent smile on her face. It's awesome. It's just so cute and so fun. And then Hannah, like, overnight has recognizing all of her colors. And so it's really crazy to have seen 2 weeks ago where we're like, what color is this? And then she would whisper it because she wasn't sure she had the right color. And it was like she was afraid to tell us the wrong color, which I don't know why, because it's not like we're like, no, it wasn't red, it was purple, yelling at her. But she would just whisper it, and now she like screams it because she knows she's right. And it's really like, how did you learn that? That's so crazy. Yes, we've been working with you on it, but not that much. So that's been really fun. She continues to test us and go through the tantrums, and it's fun. And we got her a new bed. Finally got her a toddler bed instead of just a mattress on the floor. I wish I had a bed like this when I was little. So it has like a little house over it, and it has like bookshelves on it on the side. It's really cool. She definitely had a rough night. Last night was the first night with it, transitioning to it. She kept asking Brandon, where bed? Like, where's her old bed? They need routine, and they really like familiarity. So as much as we're like, oh, it's such a cool bed, she's going to love it, it's going to be great, she's like, I'm confused, That's another thing to remember. Like, even though it's like a cool new stage, she's very uncertain of it. And we, again, I told Brandon, it'll be about 3 to 5 days with everything we've done with her transitions. It's been about 3 to 5 days of her not doing well with it, and then it clicking. So
you and Brandon also had a conversation this week as a follow-up to one of our previous conversations on a different episode.
Yeah. I told you guys in previous episodes I've been having like crazy pregnancy envy of Michelle, and I made some comments to Brandon about that, like, are you sure you're done? You sure we're done? And he finally said to me, are you gonna resent me forever if we don't have another kid? And I was like, ooh, like, step back. We agreed to two, and that is what I want. I want 2 kids. But when I think about being pregnant again, I think it's such a fun, like, oh, I'd love to be pregnant again, and then it was like, oh, I'd love to have a baby again, even though Aubrey's been, it's challenging. You don't sleep much. Like, I was just talking to my cousin who's very pregnant. She's due due March 10th, but she was like, when do you sleep if you breastfeed? And I was like, well, you don't for like a while, and it's like those things after a year, they're not that big of a deal. But while you're in it, you're like, I'm never sleeping. This is so hard, right? So I was like, all right, Brandon, you need to get your referral to get a vasectomy. Like, let's just get this done, because I feel like once I know like there's no chance, I'll let it go. But right now I'm kind of like, well, what about just one more? But I don't want to be outnumbered, and that's great if other people do. I no judgment. I always wanted 4 kids at one point, and now I'm like, oh boy, 2 is plenty. One-on-one is good, if we can divide and conquer. But if they're outnumbering us, it's like, which one do we go to, right?
Well, that's exciting, and just notable conversations. I'm sure it's one of those things that just never really ends in some capacity too. Danielle, how's your week?
It's been going good. Weston finally took his first steps on Saturday. And so today he actually took 10 steps from me and my husband. It was like 10 feet.
Oh my gosh.
It was so cute.
That's
it's like a little
crazy.
That's
drunk.
huge.
Yeah, I know.
That's so
like
much.
a little drunk baby.
Well, that's like a massive, like, okay, he
Yeah.
walked and now he's walking distances.
Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of times he does fall over, and then I'll like grab him and bring him back, and he giggles when I like drag him back to me. He's like laughing, and I sit him back up, and I'm like, and his feet already start like moving before, like he's just ready to go. I'm like, we got to get your balance, and I let go, and then he'll like walk or fall.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's been fun. When y'all said your 2 walked, I'm like, all right, that means Weston. He's usually like a week or 2 behind like your kids. So I'm like, it's coming soon. I know it. But same with crawling. Both of yours were crawling before.
Yeah, but now Weston's crushing the walking right now. Like she's been taking like 5 steps, and that's it, like twice a day. So it's like, yes, we've seen steps, but it's not really like, it's not walking, and I'm still not seeing like the will to be like, I want to walk yet. So we'll get there, but no rush for her.
No rush at all.
How did you guys react?
We got really excited. Sometimes I think he's like, okay, well, that's a lot. So I'm just going to crawl away. Because we're like,
like one time we reacted so much, like me and Ryan and the in-laws, and she started crying because she got so overwhelmed. So that's probably why she stopped trying to walk. I was like, no, I'm sorry.
I know, we get I get too excited sometimes, and yeah. So, but we were very excited. Just the other thing too, I've been trying to introduce like a utensil. I know he's not going to get it, but it's just cute watching him with a fork, and he tries to scoop and it flings out, or he'll like lay a piece of food on his fork and then he grabs it off and then puts it in his mouth. So it's just the concept. So that's been kind of fun just watching him use that. And then just preparing for his birthday. We're going to my in-laws on the big island of Hawaii next week for his birthday, and my parents are actually flying out and my sister, so gonna have everybody there, and we're excited. It's a little destination birthday. This boy has been more places than I've ever been, like, or at least in my first half of life. Until my 20s, 25s, like he's been so many places, but it's because family lives on the opposite sides of the United States. We're excited about that. And then I guess the last thing, I feel like tonight, I swear he told me he wanted to go. It sounded like he was saying night, night, but he was yelling. He was going night, 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 but he was doing this. I was like, I think he's tired. My son starts to have a meltdown, like hyper, like he gets really hyper when he's tired. He's not like crying or like fussy. He's just bouncing off the wall and just.
That's how Hannah is too. I think that's pretty common. It's crazy.
So I didn't know that. I figured he'd be kind of fussy, or no, he just gets on a whole different level. Oh, and last week, so I know I told you I've been trying to put myself out there and make friends. And then I went from no friends to going to 3 baby showers last weekend. So I broke the bank at Target. It was fun though. Yeah.
That's great.
That's awesome. My week's been good. Today was an off day. I think I'm feeling like tired and pregnant today. Generally, work, I'm just like transitioning to a new job within my work, and it's been really exciting, but like today was just wild, just like back-to-back meetings all day. We got a text from our daycare that there was a soft lockdown today, and I think that was an emotional journey. The text really presumed that things were okay. They just took extra precaution, but it was still this moment that just surfaced so much intensity of putting your child in that, and just this moment where you try to control so much in their lives and create such a safe environment, but some things are just out of control. And so that was just a little bit of a wild thing. Luckily, like an hour later, I had my virtual call with my therapist, so it was a good chance to talk that out. And then we picked up Sierra from daycare, and she just was so upset. Like daycare's saying that she's been having really bad diarrhea again, which always leads to terrible diaper rash, where like I'm worried that like the diaper changing stations become like a traumatic experience for her. Like she cries, she resists it. It's like that on top of like trying to figure out how to navigate this transition from the bottle to milk, and she's not eating as much solids as we want her to. She's like, she picks random meals and she'll eat as much as us. And then most other meals she won't eat at all. And like, I know that's normal and I know that's that, but it's also making just bringing up a lot of questions on how to properly transition. And she, in the like last 2 months at daycare, she doesn't touch her lunch basically every day. She stole Weston's cracker once, but other than that, we've been told she'll like eat a Cheerio or a snack, but it's just bringing up a lot of like, am I doing the right thing? Is she lactose intolerant? You know, that's after a conversation with my doctor. Should we switch formula? But right now, if we try goat milk formula, should we just buy goat milk regular? You know, or should we actually try a new formula? Is that going to cause more pain? Do we buy one that's more, you know, soy based, or, you know, an almond or oat milk? But is that going to be enough nutrition? You know, it's just all these questions that I just am stewing with right now. And it's just so hard to see her in pain and feel like you don't know what to do. So that's my day.
That is motherhood to a T, in my opinion, of like your brain constantly being like, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? Why can't I understand what she's saying? Why it's so hard? I'm being a terrible mother. I should know my daughter. It's like, we are so hard on ourselves, and you know, you're doing the best that you can and keep trying. And the fact that you're even saying these things is such a big thing, not just like oh well, you know, this is just what it is to be a kid. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm not trying to downplay it because I get it.
Yeah, if we were to sum up this podcast, what you just said, that's it. Why we made this podcast. That's what this podcast is all about. So
yeah, but you know, she's sleeping. I was just looking at the video. She's like sleeping butt up because I think her butt probably hurts to sleep on it. And but I've got my Girl Scout cookies thanks to my doula's daughter and my fake wine. So doing okay. Other than that, and on to the next day, and just excited to be here. All right. Should we dive into the third trimester?
Woo.
All right.
Let's do it.
Okay. So third trimester, got 3 months, the final countdown to prepare for birth, prepare for your baby, and then you got to like eventually get ready to get the baby out. So let's start with how to prepare for birth, right? Like this is when, at least for me, pregnancy is fun. And then all of a sudden it just like hits you that you're like, wow, I need to get a human out of me. Let's figure out how to do that. And so, you know, I figure we could go different directions, and I don't know where people want to start, but like, did you take a prenatal class or Lamaze class? Did you prepare a birth plan? And then I'd love to like end with like, what was in your hospital bag? What are like the make sure things people don't forget? So I don't know. Danielle, did you do any prenatal classes?
I did. I think it was around 32 weeks. That's what it says in my notes. Yeah, 32 weeks. We started, it was a 6-week birthing class, and it was at night. Once a week, and Ryan and I went. I feel like we got a lot. It was very helpful and informational. I definitely forgot how to breathe. You know, there's a whole class on how to breathe and the different, like, get through the contractions. Luckily, Ryan was paying attention because he was like, you're supposed to breathe like this. When I was actually going through contractions, I did forget that. But I found it very helpful and informative, and we got a tour of the hospital. Did you go to a class?
Yeah, I did a 10-week birth class through my doulas, which was good. I generally am more one of those people who was like, the 10 weeks felt long to me. We also gave birth before the classes were over. And so I kind of wish I would have done more condensed one and maybe picked some of my topics, because it got long, and it was a lot of like the art of birth versus it took a while to get into the science of birth. So we did a lot of like, which was good, like the practice of what do you need to keep each other calm and in relationship stuff, which was helpful. But I guess for me, I just was so blind to a lot of the birth steps that's really where I wanted to focus. And I also think I was craving kind of more of a what to do with the baby after it's here classes, and it wasn't quite that. So my biggest recommendation is, you know, really think to yourself, like, what's your must-have list of things you want to learn, and then look at your local hospitals, your birth collectives, your classes, and find a class that fits for you. So we're not going to take it again. I feel like we now kind of know the drill, but it helped prepare a birth plan, which we'll talk about in a minute here. How about you, Leah?
Our doulas actually, they offered us a different class because we wouldn't be able to finish the 10-week course that you and Ryan took. And so they offered us to join a hypnobirthing course, which I was interested in because I really wanted to have that natural birth. It was interesting. There were some really good techniques that I got out of it for sure, to how to get through the contractions and how Stephen could support me the best and other things along that lines. But I'm kind of with you, Michelle. Like, I wanted to know what you're supposed to do with the baby when you get home. I had actually crowdsourced that on one of my social medias. I was like, what the heck do you do with a newborn? Anybody want to tell me about this? So I kind of wanted some of that information. And the course that I took was very much just about the birth and preparing yourself to be strong and powerful through the birth process. It was a good course. I enjoyed it. I actually read the book and used a lot of the techniques when I was in labor. I don't know if I would have preferred the 10-week course, and I don't know if I would have preferred this.
It's a hard one to find the perfect one. So if anyone has a perfect one out there that's virtual, we'll post it because we want to know. When you said, I want to know what to do with the baby, there's one YouTube video I ended up watching that stands out. And it was literally just essentially a live stream of a mom's first 3 nights at home. And it was sped up and they talked about didn't show her sleeping and wasn't, etc. But it was actually super helpful to be I think we talk a lot about we have the baby and then you'll figure it out the first few nights, but what's the details and the steps? So it kind of showed how many times she got up, how she breastfed, how many times she had to change the diaper. Of course, she looked perfect and was in no pain at all from what I could gather, which was definitely different than my experience, but still the progression of the nights was actually kind of interesting. Lisa, how about you?
So again, we've talked about before, I'm a big ignorance is bliss kind of person. Lots of people have done this without classes. I know the class is going to freak me out. Just a quick blip. I hit 3rd trimester, and and I'm sorry for the insensitive probably words, I felt like my pregnancy was a death march. It felt like it took forever. 3rd trimester, even more so, took forever to get to see the baby, right? But I went into a crazy spiral in my 3rd trimester of oh my gosh, what did I decide to do? My life is never going to be the same. I'm never going to be able to travel again. This is so terrible. I don't know what I did. And it was just a pure panic. I ended up luckily finding my therapist, which is funny because I called and left a message and was her message was I'm currently not taking new clients, but leave me a message and I'll give you a referral to another therapist that I know that is taking clients. And I just started sobbing on the message and was I'm having a baby and I don't know what I did. And she called back and she's I have an opening. And I was okay, great. And she helped me a lot. I took one class. It was on a Saturday for 3 hours. And I can't remember the name of it. It's a very popular book and they do classes too. But what they basically do is they take 2 moms that obviously had kids within the last year, and then they have them lead the class. And the one girl was her kid was 9 months old and she was it's miserable. I'm miserable. I never leave the house. My kid is miserable. My kid just cries all the time. And I was this is horrible. This is horrible. What did I do? Right? And the other mom was I have a full-time live-in nanny and she does all my laundry and all. I was okay, well, that's not relatable either. So
how did they pick those people to teach the class?
They will. And even after the class ended, I got a ton of emails from them, please come teach, please come teach. Not we pay you. You're a volunteer and you should come tell people what your experience is. And they have a lead in there, but then the lead backs out and leaves after 20 minutes introducing the 2 moms. And you split into different groups with each of the moms and you can just grill them on all these things. And it was just horrible. It was a horrible experience. So when people are oh, I'm going to take a class, I'm oh, scarred. Brandon took a dad's class at the same time. And again, we did this during COVID, so everything was Zoom. And Brandon, the one takeaway he took was they all had to make a pledge not to shake the baby. So it was legitimate, you will not shake this baby if it starts crying all the time and you're really upset. And that's his takeaway from it. And I was what did we do? It didn't help my anxiety and depression at all walking away from that class.
Well, I feel like they should do a better job of vetting the moms that volunteer to teach the class, because that sounds like it's not it wasn't relatable, right?
No. I mean, it definitely...
It's not what you wanted to hear either.
Well, it's not what you want to hear when you're already very pregnant and you're already freaking out that you're going to not do it right, and then you get this class and it's what were we thinking? What were we thinking putting these, like you said, putting these people on this class and making you feel bad. That was the only class we took. We didn't take a birthing class. We didn't take any other classes other than that. That was it.
Did anyone do anything to prepare their body for birth, right? Like that was kind of how we prepared our mind, if you may. But how did we physically prepare? I can go first. I did all the things and sneak peek to my birth story. It didn't really help, but I subscribed to spinning babies through my doulas. And I don't say maybe it didn't help. Like the good news is Sierra was in a great position and she was delivered as a healthy baby. So like, it maybe that did really help. It just, my push process, as you'll hear, was pretty long. So yeah, I did a lot of spinning babies techniques, which there's like 3 or 4 activities they recommend you do every night. It's like doing this inversion and these hip openers. So that was kind of interesting. One is another one where you take essentially like a scarf and put it around your belly and have your partner kind of wiggle it very, very gently. And it felt so good. Like it's amazing how much weight is in your belly. And just to like have that moment of relief was really cool. And then I did prenatal yoga every Thursday. So that was one of my favorite portions. That was really good mentally as well. Like I highly recommend finding that if that's something you're interested in. What I loved about the yoga classes, we started every class, each mom would say how far along they were and something they were navigating with pregnancy that week. And so it became a little community and met some good friends from there. That was kind of the gist of it, but I do think it kind of helped and try to sit in my yoga ball as much as possible. Did anyone else do anything to prepare their body, if you may?
I never want to see or taste a date again in my entire life. I had a date smoothie every single day starting at 36 weeks. I drank red raspberry leaf tea starting at 38 weeks. I used the yoga ball. I did the spinning babies. I did acupuncture. When we got even closer, I did some pumping. I tried all of it. I did all of it. And unfortunately for me, none of it worked. But yeah, I have a very sour relationship with dates to this day.
Leah, that sounds really funny because it sounds like the baby's still in you. Like none of it worked. The baby's still in me.
I mean, he was in there for a long time.
I am now a year and 9 months pregnant.
So cozy.
I also did prenatal yoga, but I just did it from the Peloton app. They have a good prenatal, postnatal yoga practice for that. And then I just did the transversal abdominal breathing, also known as TVA. Basically, you're giving the baby a nice hug. I guess what I was most scared of was where your abs spread apart, the
diastasis recti.
Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. So I guess I was really afraid of that. So I practiced the breathing, but I also exercised. So just making sure that I was focusing, because I was still exercising up until probably 2 weeks.
Yeah,
lifting weights and things before. So I just wanted to make sure, because you don't want your belly to cone. And so I was really very aware of positions I was like putting myself in and just making sure I wasn't coning, and then practice breathing.
I just kept walking and doing yoga 3 times a week. I didn't do anything specific. That, again, I stayed away from Google. Google was very scary for me. So, and I'm mostly referencing Hannah's pregnancy because with Aubrey, it was kind of like, been there, done that, So as far as prepping my body, I made sure, because my doctor for Hannah's pregnancy was like, do not do Kegels. Don't do Kegels. And I was like, okay. So I made sure I wasn't doing Kegels. Not that I like, you have to concentrate on those. It's not like you just like, oops, I did a Kegel.
Did she say why you shouldn't do Kegels?
Yeah. So the theory behind that is that you're already really tight because you haven't had a baby come through you before. And if you're Kegeling and you're getting those muscles tighter, that it's going to make it even harder for the baby to come out. So they want you to be loose down there, essentially, was her theory.
That makes a lot of sense. Though we're not doctors, do not take the advice from us.
No.
Please talk to your doctor. But that Weston never dropped. And we'll get to my birthing story another time. But yeah, he was still -1 when I was 10 centimeters dilated. So that's just an interesting theory.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I've done thousands of Kegels since birth, but probably thousands is too small of a number, but
they want you to do it for the second pregnancy though. If you had a vaginal birth your first time, because they need you to tighten them back up and be able to control them and not be loose, is what they said. So who knows?
It's actually on my list of questions for the next appointment, because we're already trying to track those. Because I'm like, based on my experience, should I keep tightening it up or do I keep it loose? What do we do here? All right, last topic on preparing for birth. You go to the hospital. Did anyone have a birth plan? How did you prepare that birth plan? And then I'm also curious, did anyone have anything that they're like, don't forget this in your hospital bag?
I feel like I was probably the patient who the nurses all kind of were like, okay, yeah, that's nice, sweetie. Ha ha ha. Did you see this crazy lady? Because my birth plan was like a poster. It was very beautifully designed. It had all of my specific details and requests on it. Spoiler alert, nothing on that birth plan happened. And so I had like 5 copies so that I could give them at shift change to a new nurse if I was still there. So I definitely, working with the doulas and then doing the hypnobirthing class, I think really influenced what I wanted and how I saw my birth going. So I did that. And then the one thing that I saw on Instagram, Facebook, something, was that somebody had packed a stroller fan in their hospital bag for after birth because your hormones, like, at least, and this was in my experience, like I went from cold to like sweltering hot to cold to sweltering hot after I gave birth. And that stroller fan came in clutch. It was small. I was able to keep it and manipulate it in my hand because I wasn't able to get out of bed after birth. It really worked. So that was my top recommended item for the hospital. And full-size towels, because for some reason the towels at our hospital are like the size of
so
a
tiny.
washcloth.
Yes. Yes.
That's a good point. Oh my gosh. I was actually going to I was like, Leah recommended the stroller fan and it was such a clutch purchase. I was going to recommend, so I had a long epidural. My ankles were the size of my thighs when I left the hospital. So the things I would recommend are like very baggy pants and shoes that stretch or are slip on, because that was I did not look cute leaving the hospital and that was okay with me. I just needed to exit the building and get home at that point. But that was my things I didn't plan to pack, but I luckily had stretchy enough stuff that ended up working. So that's my recommendations for packing. But also to your point of like the moms being so hot, they're going to keep the air really cold. So for your partners, our doulas recommended that the partners bring in like an extra jacket because they're going to be freezing in that too.
Yeah, we took a blanket for Steven.
Oh, nice. And that was another thing. You can also leave stuff in your car. Like, don't feel like, and you can go out and get things. Like, I think I had this interpretation that we could only fit what was in the bag and bring it in. But we ended up doing like multiple loads to the car for little things you would need, or like pre-birth and then post-birth stuff, which was kind of nice.
As far as like the one thing I was like, I don't want to forget it, was they were like, you can bring a speaker to play your own music. So I made this like birthing playlist like 2 days before I went into labor. I went into labor a week early with Hannah, but I made this playlist that was like maybe 10 songs long, like as if that was going to be long enough. So I brought my speaker. But other than that, like most of the stuff for Hannah, because it was COVID, they were like, you can only bring one bag in. You can't bring a pillow. You can't bring a blanket. You can't bring like anything in one bag. And we were like, one bag. All right. What are we going to do? So we mostly had snacks. We had a lot of snacks because our hospital for your partner would only allow them to have one meal a day, which is great because they told us too that he wasn't going to be allowed to leave because of COVID. So that was really rough too, because it was like, all right, he can't leave and he has to buy at least 2 meals a day. Like, this is crazy. Right. So that was kind of frustrating. But then with Aubrey, they're like, bring whatever you want. You want to bring 10 bags? Bring 10 bags. You want to bring your pillow, your sleeping bag, your blankets? You want to bring your favorite stuffed animal? Do it. Bring it all, right? So it was like, as far as bringing stuff, like you can look up a million lists on Instagram or on Google, and they all say to bring something different. We had like a hospital consultation. I don't remember when that is, 32 weeks maybe. And they kind of tell you some stuff to bring and to make sure you have. And it really has to do with who you are. Again, I mirror that sentiment. Like, I would get really hot, really cold, really hot, really cold. So I had sweatpants and shorts that I brought because I didn't like just wearing the gown. That just wasn't wasn't my jam. I wanted to have bottoms on. I don't care about being naked on top, but on bottom, that's just not comfortable to me. I feel like I should be going pee or something without bottoms on. I don't know why. So I did that. And then as far as a birth plan, so I talked to my doctor about that, and I was like, all right, what should I be like deciding on for a birth plan? She's like, basically whether you're comfortable with drugs or not. And I was like, okay. And whether you really want to have a vaginal birth, or if you're okay doing a C-section. And I was like, okay. So when they called for the hospital consultation, they're like, what's your birth plan? I said, get the baby out healthy, whatever way that means. And I definitely want all the drugs. Give me all the drugs. So was not opposed to that. I didn't do a lot of research on that, to be honest, but everybody in my life that I know has always taken the drugs. I didn't know anybody that went no drugs before me. So that wasn't even a thought to me. Like, I didn't think about that. And again, like, I feel like Leah and Michelle, definitely their doulas were so informative. They learned so much from their doulas, and I learned so much from them because of their doulas, and obviously Hannah's over a year older than their kid. So we learned a lot for Aubrey from them. Yeah, as far as birthing plan goes, that's how that went.
When I think about my birthing plan, I'm like, oh, that's cute. Because again, it didn't go the way that I had planned it at all. And we'll get to that later. But I think it is important because it also, like you said, Lisa, it's what care that you want, but then also the care for the baby as soon as the baby is born, whether you want to delay clamp cording or delay a bath, or if you want them, like my plan was to have the golden hour. I wanted the baby right on me right away. And then I didn't want they could weigh him later, whatever they could do while he was on my chest. That's what I wanted. Did it happen that way? No. But so you do get to choose or not choose, I guess, what you want. And they do their best to follow it as much as they can, but obviously it's a plan. It's not set in stone. You made a good point about the shoes, Michelle, because after my feet, because I also had an epidural, after they were not swollen anymore, and I tried to put my feet into my Hey Dudes, they were like flip-flops, like flop, like as Hey Dudes stretch. And I didn't realize, I knew my feet were so big after, because I was also induced, which also causes you to swell, and my feet stretched out my shoes, and I couldn't fit in my shoes for a couple weeks, I felt like. Also, you mentioned a speaker. Lisa, I had a speaker. I'd recommend that if you want to listen to your playlist. And then a long charger for your phone, like a long cord. I had the 10-foot cord because there's no plugins close to the bed. So it was nice. It was like plugged in way over here, and I could keep my phone next to me and keep it charged.
Yeah, I second that for sure. Long charging cord for your phone.
That's a great idea. I still use my 10-foot charger next to my bed right now. So great idea.
So do I.
Yeah, I'm also Googling Hey Dudes over here. I was like, ooh, those are cool shoes.
They're so comfy. I love them.
But Leah, is this our moment to talk about Kizicks and how much we love Kizicks?
Oh my gosh. Well, yes, especially for the third trimester, because oh my goodness, I got to a point where I would throw up every time I bent over to put shoes on. This was the reason that I wore high heels in my third trimester up until I was 9 months pregnant, because I could just slip them on. And that's where Kizicks come into play, because, oh my gosh, now it's all I wear.
Yes. Well, Kizicks are slip-on shoes. Like, you do not have to tie them. You just step into them. I bought my first pair during pregnancy, truly the best pregnancy purchase I have. And now I own at least 4 pairs of Kizicks. They're awesome. My only recommendation is like size up, because sometimes they come a little small, but they are awesome shoes. And I can, Leah and I can both give referral codes because they're awesome.
We are going to talk about preparing for the baby. So looking at choosing names, setting up your house, nesting, setting up the nursery, preparing food, and prepping for breastfeeding. So choosing names. So again, we didn't know what we were going to have sex of the baby wise. So we had to come up with girls' names and boys' names. And boys' names did not happen for us. We went to the hospital with no boys' names and went to the hospital with 2 girls' names. And we said, you know what, we'll decide when we see the baby, which name we were going to go with. It was an agonizing process for us. Like, we would go through the names, and then Brandon would be like, I don't like that name. And I loved that name, right? Whatever it was, and vice versa. So it took us a long time to even settle on the two names. And then, like I said, I think on the last episode, my cousin who is due March 10th is like, they're down to like 13 names. And I'm like, geez Louise, that's a lot of names.
So once the baby was born, how did you decide between the two names that you had?
I didn't. We were down. So we had two names chosen, which were Hannah and Nora. And I've never seen a blonde Nora or a brunette Hannah. And so I was like, all right, so if the baby comes out with hair, I'll know which one to name them because of that. It's silly. The baby comes out and you're like, that looks like a baby, like there was no identifier for me. So we went in and Brandon was like, I love Nora. I love the name Nora. We're going to go with Nora. On our way to the hospital. And then we got to Hannah coming out and he was like, Hannah, it's Hannah. And I was like, great, let's do Hannah. It was just, he just had that intuition. He just had that feeling. We went back to the hospital, not knowing again for a girl or a boy for Aubrey, but we had boys' names this time because I was convinced it was a boy. And so we had to go with a boys' names, but we get ready to go in. I had a scheduled C-section, and he goes like literally 5 minutes before we're going in. He's like, so I don't want to name our kid Nora. And I was like, if it's a girl. And I was like, what? You're telling me this now? Yeah. Well, we can't have two kids that have the ending of their name as can't have a Hannah and a Nora. And I was like, unbelievable. You are unbelievable saying this to me now. And I'm like dying because, at this point, we're just excited. The anticipation's great. It's there. It's like, okay, well, that's exciting. We have it narrowed down that it's going to be Aubrey if it's girl, but we don't have a middle name then because I think we were probably going to do Nora, Aubrey, or Aubrey, Nora. So then it was like, as a whim, Brandon had to come up with a middle name because they took him and the baby back to the room and I stayed in the operating room and I was like, by the time I get back, you better have a middle name for that baby. So it was pretty funny. So that was our naming situation. How about one of you guys?
Well, I was going to ask you one more question. How did you pick middle names for both of them?
So Brandon knew for middle name for Hannah, his godfather had recently passed away. And so we were going to name middle name after him because it could go both girls or boys. And then again, for Aubrey, he came up with it like crazy how on the spot he did it. By the time I got back, he had a middle name for her. So that was awesome. And it was ode to his sister and my brother, whose names are very similar. So
we really like the name Wes, but I am one of those people who probably if it weren't for Steven grounding me would have named him something weird and off the wall and people would be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with them?
That's a great point. Can I interject that really quickly?
Yeah.
Because that's a big debate, I think, for people naming names of wanting something unique or wanting something run of the mill. So yeah, that's a great point to talk about.
So I definitely wanted something unique. I wanted probably something a little bit more crazy than Steven would have wanted. And so we kind of found that we liked the name Wes, but we didn't want to go with Wesley. I don't know where I first heard it or how we saw it, but Wesson came up and I was like, oh, I like that. It's a little bit different, but he can go by Wes and it's still kind of normal. Now, to this day, I realize that I did to him what my parents did to me, which is I have two E's in my name and nobody ever knows how to spell my name or pronounce my name for that fact. And now Wesson is always getting Weston pretty regularly. And so I realized that, I continued that generational problem by passing it on to him. But we call him Wes most of the time. Yeah, so it was just kind of trying to be a little bit different, but not too off the wall. But apparently, my in-laws, they work in the grocery industry, and apparently there's a frying oil named Wesson. And so when we first told them that the name was Wesson, they were like the frying oil? We were like, didn't know that was a thing. So you learn something new every day.
It's funny that you say that, Leah. My mother-in-law said the same thing when she heard his name. She's like the oil? And I was like, I was thinking like Smith and Wesson, like the gun. I wasn't thinking like oil.
My sister said that we had more people be like the oil than I could even count. I lost track. And I honestly had no idea it was an oil. And now I see it all the time, of course. And then when we were actually most recently up in Colorado, we were at my father-in-law's store and we needed frying oil for something, and they did not sell Wesson frying oil. I was like, listen, you have to have this here. Like, come on. Danielle, how'd you guys come up with Weston?
I don't even know where it came from. I feel like it just came to me. It was either that or James. I wanted to name him after my father, who's Jim, but his name is James. But then I was thinking about nicknames. I'm like, well, I don't want him to be Jim or Jimmy because that's my dad. So we ended up going with Weston. It just kind of like popped in my head. And most people were like the hotel, like the Marriott Weston. And I have a funny story. When I was younger and I was at a wedding and there might have been a lot of wine or a little bit, I don't know. I told my cousin, she was, the DD and driving us back home after the wedding. I'm like, Brittany, because the after party was at the Weston. I was like, take me to the Weston. So it's a running joke. I just like that name. I don't know. So it just stuck. We had some girl's name picked out, but I just was really expecting a boy. So it was those two.
One of the stories that stood out when we met for the first time was how, is it your sister has a son named Easton?
Oh, so my dad's a twin, and my aunt, his twin sister, grandson is named Easton. And I really didn't even think about it until it was like official. We named him Weston, and I'm like, yeah. So he has like a second cousin named Easton. So there's Easton who lives on the East Coast, and Weston, we live out west. So I thought that was pretty cool. Not intentional, but.
Michelle, how'd you guys come up with Sierra?
We didn't really think about names ahead of time. And then when we found out we were pregnant, one of the things we were talking about is we wanted a normal name with a node to nature, or something that represents nature. So that was some of the things that we were thinking about when we were going about names. So Amber is a really good example. Got a great friend named Amber, or just something that represents that. And then actually, the moment we found out we were pregnant, Ryan happened to be drinking a Sierra Nevada beer. And we were like, Sierra, that's kind of a fun name. We have a lot of connections to that. We lived in San Francisco for the longest time, and we used to go to Lake Tahoe in the Sierra Nevadas all the time. We had 2 ski leases up there. It's where we said, I love you. So we were like, we really like Sierra, but we were like, let's not jump the gun right now. So over the next trimester, we kept talking about names. And especially once we found out it was a girl, we kept pulsing other names, and then just Sierra just stuck the whole time. And I'm just couldn't be happier with her name. We call her Cece a lot too, which is really fun, but it feels like a great fit for her. It's unique enough, has a good story to it. We have no idea what we're doing for round 2, but at least we figured one of them out.
Are you going to go with the nature inspiration again? Have you thought about that? Or
yeah, if I take that back, if it's a boy, we have the name picked out and it does fit in that nature theme. If we have a girl, I have no clue what direction we'll head.
Oh man, now I'm gonna start trying to think what you guys are naming the boy.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know what it is. I'm not gonna say it out loud until I think I know what it is.
One more week and we'll figure out, the sex of the baby. So we'll see where we head.
Will you guys tell people? So that's another thing too.
That's a good question.
Because I know a lot of people who didn't share names, and there are times that I wish I hadn't shared my names because the people were super critical of our name. All the names we picked out. Like my mom especially was like, she tried. I finally was like, can you just not give me a reaction? I can't handle this. My pregnant brain is angry and I don't like the criticism.
For me and for Ryan, I don't know. I guess it was less about critiques of the name. For me, it was like when you put a name to the baby, it all becomes really real. And I just always had this anxiety that something was still going to go wrong in birth. And I think I was so anxious to name or put an identity to her too early, especially out in the world. It's one thing if it's private to us. So I think for me, it was less about the critiques, but more about the attachment to it.
So do you think you'll tell people for this one, or you think you'll go with the same thing?
We ended up telling our families the name a month before. So I mean, Ryan and I can't keep a secret, especially with our own birth stories to save our lives. So you'll eventually hear.
I felt very similarly about sharing the name. It made it super, super real. And that was very overwhelming to me. But we started I mean, Stephen and I started calling him by his name as soon as we found out he was a viable embryo. So, I mean, we called him by his name the whole time, but sharing the name to me, really made it like a real thing. So I share that sentiment with you.
It's interesting too, like looking back on naming your kids what you named them. Do you ever have any regrets, any feelings, or I mean, that's a hard thing to say about your kid, but like, do you think you should have considered any other way, or are you just named them and left it and didn't even talk about it or think about it afterwards?
I didn't love Weston's name until he was born. And now I've grown to love it more and more. And I feel like it fits him really well as I've seen his personality develop. But I wasn't fully like sold on it until he was born. And I was like, yeah, this is him. I mean, I don't have any regrets. I mean, I just feel bad that I did to him what my parents did to me.
It's interesting, right? Like I said the same thing about Hannah. Like I didn't love any of the names going into the hospital. And then, as Hannah went through her first year, I was like, it's a perfect name. It's a good name. But now I really love Aubrey's name. And I'm like, I should have gone a little bit more unique with Hannah. So then it's like but I really wanted unique names too. And Brandon was like, well, I was in class with other Brandons and it was like instant friends and I loved it. And I was like, weird. I've never went to school with any Lisas. So for me, it was like, oh, I liked being the only Lisa. And my brother said the same thing. He's like, oh, I loved being in a class with other Dans because then it was the same thing, right? Like I had instant friends that you could connect with that had the same name as me. And I was like, that's interesting.
How did everyone prepare their house, right? Like nesting, nursery, did anyone catch the bug?
Just a quick thing, just to tell people what nesting is. So there's a theory out there that your baby's not ready to come until you start nesting. And nesting is when you literally get all the final touches in. You get the clothes washed, you get the clothes folded and they're put away, the nursery set up, your bassinet set up if you're going to do a bassinet. Basically, like there's no stone unturned. You're ready. So that's what nesting is.
Again, that's probably why Weston didn't want to come out, because I don't know. I feel like I have to have everything in its place. I'm like that now and I'm working on it, but my house has to be clean. And I think I started nesting at probably the beginning of pregnancy, but it really got bad right there towards the end. I remember one night Ryan was up real late doing homework. I think it was 2 a.m. and I just couldn't sleep, couldn't get comfortable. So I just started cleaning the house, just vacuuming and dusting and just all the things. I was looking at the notes that my husband had wrote that I was doing during pregnancy, and there's a lot about nesting and cleaning. I wanted to get the crib set up, and he was like, we'll get to it. And finally I was frustrated and I just did it myself. And I put it all together and I was really proud of myself. I was like, okay, you got to help me with the dresser. Though he didn't even use that for the first 6 months, but I just felt like I had to have everything in its place. If you know me personally, you know that I have to clean all the time. And unfortunately, that was passed down through the generations of my grandfather was in the Air Force. Things had to be clean, so my mom, like to the point where you have to have triangles in the carpet. I don't know if you know about that, but that's the kind of person that I am. You have to have, when you vacuum, it's not vacuumed unless you got triangles in the carpet. So,
Danielle, when we've been looking at houses for the past 5 years, and when I see real estate photos, if they don't have the triangles in the carpet, I'm like, that house isn't clean enough.
Yeah, that's me. I really, and this isn't a joke, I really do need to probably talk to a therapist and work this stuff out, because I do get so anxious about things not being clean. And I will say the last thing I did, I organized the spice cabinets by alphabet. And if anyone, my sister or my husband, would put it out of place, I'd call them out. But it's messed up now. It's fine.
I'm alphabetical now. Crazy type A's all in this podcast.
We had the nursery and everything set up and ready at least a month before Weston made his debut. So I don't know why he didn't want to come into our nice, cozy, beautiful room that was set up for him. I did a lot of the cleaning, the magic eraser on the baseboards, get the dust off that. I cleaned off some of my grandma's antique teapots that had rust on them and soaked them. And so I did all of those kind of things as well. No, unfortunately, making a nice, warm, cozy room for Wesson still did not make him come out any sooner.
That's awesome. Yeah, ours was a lot of house projects. Like we painted our whole kitchen. I wore a mask the whole time. When Ryan was gone one weekend, I organized our entire garage. I was up to like 2 a.m. one night doing it. Just found that like I wanted to get like every nook and cranny of the house organized. I did that again not too long ago, but it's just amazing how quickly things get messed up again. But it's nice to start from a good base. We had moved every year for the last 8 years or something like that. And so by nature, it was like this nice cleansing journey that you could pack and unpack and get rid of a lot of stuff. And so I found it's also just nice to reorganize and clean things out.
Michelle, I want to say one thing because you said you recently did some cleaning. Well, our group of girls has a shared calendar, and there was a time a couple months ago that somebody's cleaning and organizing list showed up on the shared calendar, which included cleaning the washing machine and the drying machine. And I have to say, very, very impressed with your rotation of house chores.
Well, here's the funny thing. I found some lists. I was like, one day our washer smelled. I was like, we should probably figure out how to clean this. And I saw, of course, an Instagram on it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to put a reminder, what we should do monthly, what we should do every 6 months. I have not looked at that invite since I put it on my calendar, nor have I cleaned my washer dryer since. So, it was a nice thought, and but I haven't done any of it. And then, I think the other big part for prepping for the baby is breastfeeding. For me, I thought most of it would happen afterwards, but a lot, I kind of at the end kind of started going into crunch time. And for me, it was awesome. Someone recommended this website called Aeroflow, which you can get basically a free breast pump or use a discount through your insurance, which was really nice. So I got that. I ended up setting up with a lactation specialist. And then I'd love to hear what everyone else kind of did to prep for breastfeeding. And then I'd love to talk a little bit about colostrum harvesting because it's one of my favorite topics out there. What did everyone else do to prepare for breastfeeding?
So I didn't know that existed. And I have a huge, that being Aeroflow, that you can go on this website, put in your insurance information, and then it'll tell you what is available to you through your insurance. But it will tell you exactly what you qualify for free and then what you qualify for with a discount. I didn't know that existed for my first pregnancy. And man, I was furious when I found out that was an actual thing. Because for my first pregnancy, I took a hand-me-down pump from my sister-in-law, which was great. She decided not to breastfeed. She'd never breastfed. So the pump was unused. But her kid by that point was already 6 years old. So that pump was old, right? It was an old pump, and they have had technology improvements. So shame on my doctor. I'll straight up call that out. I think that was a huge miss by her, and she absolutely should have informed me, because then my second doctor, the doctor I had with Aubrey, was like, okay, so you got on Aeroflow, right? And I was like, what's Aeroflow? And she was like, you already have a kid, right? And I was like, yeah. She's like, did you breastfeed? I said, yeah. She's like, oh boy. Aeroflow. And then she told me about it. And so definitely utilize your insurance on that, because you can usually get a free pump. Again, I had a lactation consultant on my first pregnancy, but didn't until I got to the hospital. She was amazing. Definitely utilize that if you get that opportunity in the hospital. If they say, do you want to have a lactation consultant come see you? Do it. Even if you're not sure if you want to breastfeed or not. They're very informative, can give you all the facts, and hopefully they're unbiased. I mean, they're, of course, our lactation consultants, so they want you to breastfeed, but they won't pressure you to do so, and they understand that it's not for everybody. But anyway, yeah, so then the second go around, I did use Aeroflow, and then I sent all of those pumps that were suggested to me to my lactation consultant and said, what do you think about all of these? And she said she would give me the brands to stick with, and the brands that she knows probably weren't as successful as the others. And funnily enough, she did say the one I was using for my first pregnancy is that brand isn't typically the best. So I wouldn't suggest it. And, while I didn't know anything else, so it worked. But towards the end of me breastfeeding, it definitely, the motor went out on it. It was also 6 years old. So pretty awesome. It lasted throughout that. So
I was going to quick add, I loved having lactation consultant too, learned a lot. But one of the very tactical things that was helpful was measuring your nipple size so you could order the right parts, because that really ended up changing my output. And so, you know, a lot of them come with like a standard like 24 millimeter, I think it is. And I was like
Good
a
point.
15. So that was
Yep.
like huge to make sure you're getting the right production from your pump.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Michelle, because like certainly I read reviews on everything. I'm a review Nazi. People would be like, "Oh, this pump was trash. It was terrible." But you're like, "Okay, did you play with the settings? Did you make sure you have the right?" And I didn't know that was a thing either until I had the lactation consultant and was telling her like, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this pump." And she's like, "Okay, well, let me check it out." She's like, "Yeah, this is definitely not the right flange size for you. You need to go to a 19 or whatever it was." And that's a game changer. I mean, it's going to make your pump completely work or not work if you have the wrong one. So that's something I didn't know either.
I went through 3 different sizes before we got to the right spot. I do want to add too that I used Babylist.com and was able to get my pump for free by submitting my insurance through that too. So similar, same process. I was using Babylist for my shower registry, and they had an ad that said, "Get your pump through your insurance here." And so all I did was I took a little note to my doctor, she filled it out, and then I submitted it to them and got my pump for free through them.
Leah and Michelle, you guys both had hands-free ones because those weren't part of your insurance, or were they? Could you get 2? I don't know.
You can get it as part of your insurance, but you really get to pick one that gets covered. I personally picked the Spectra as my main one. And then, you know, after a little while, I, you know, needed to start getting more mobile when I needed to pump. And I ended up buying this one from Amazon. I can link it. It was really affordable, and I'm sure it doesn't work for everyone, but it worked great for me. I could almost get as much as I could out of the Spectra, but it was definitely like one of those pivotal game changers when it came to pumping. Similarly to, you know, Leah, et cetera, is I switched after 4 months to like exclusively pumping and then bottle feeding. And so, you know, when I'm pumping 6 times a day, it was awesome to have that, you know, the hands-free one as well. So I ended up purchasing the second one, but it was really affordable. It seems to always be on discount on Amazon too. I think it was like $70 compared to a lot of breast pumps are close to $300.
Yeah, $70 in that work. That's awesome. That is, yeah, definitely recommend checking out the pump that Michelle got then, because I was a low producer, and so I was spending a ton of time pumping when Weston was first born, and switched to exclusively pumping when he was pretty young because breastfeeding just wasn't working out very well for us. And so I also got a hands-free pump. I went with the Elvie at the recommendation of my lactation consultant, and it worked great for me. It still works for me because I am still breastfeeding. And like Michelle said, like the ability to walk around and eat my food while I'm pumping, or do my hair, or, you know, nothing too crazy or wild, but, you know, just some basic activities of daily life, to be able to reintroduce those with the freedom that the hands-free pump provided. I definitely recommend it. I invested in the Elvie. Like I said, it is definitely significantly more expensive than the one that Michelle purchased. And at the time, I was really hesitant to do it because I didn't know how long I would be breastfeeding. But here I am 51 weeks later and still using it. So it was definitely an investment that was worth it for me.
Snaps. That's so amazing.
I am attempting to now look into getting one. I changed insurance companies in January. My husband's company changed, so I'm trying to kind of beat the system and trying to get another one at a heavy discount, but we're going to see if it works. I am unfortunately a big-chested person, so I've heard that sometimes they don't work as well for big-chested people, but we'll see. I feel like I'm going to get it, and I'm going to be obsessed with it and really bummed I didn't use it for my first pregnancy, so I'm hopeful that that's what happens for me. Because right now, like Brandon's like, I don't understand. Your pump came with a necklace. Like it literally comes with a lanyard so you can wear it around the house. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. The pump itself is like, it's not huge, but it's not tiny. And it's still corded and wired. And I'm like, that would be ridiculous to have. We can jump into a topic, a whole episode about breastfeeding. And I think we should go through that because I actually would like to have my cousin on there because she, again, I told you is due March 10th. And she has been just grilling me with questions on I don't think breastfeeding's for me. It grosses me out to even think about it. And her mom didn't breastfeed any of their 3 kids because she thought it was really gross to have a baby on your boob. And I totally respect that. I had a sister-in-law that never breastfed either. And I respect those decisions. And we can go over that in heavy detail later on.
I linked in mine if you want to give it a go. It was $89, but there's a $20 coupon. So right at that $70 range. They just released a newer version that's $100. So you may want to get the newer one. My biggest thing is I had to get the inserts that fit my breasts because that was the game changer on it. Yeah, the last talk about prepping for breastfeeding is, I guess, doesn't chat about colostrum. It's something that I did last few weeks before pregnancy. And just to read from a science-backed article, not just me, but essentially colostrum is the first milk your body produces during pregnancy. It forms in the mammary glands of your breasts and plays an important role in building your baby's immune system. And it's, ends up having a lot of, extra nutrients. It's high in protein, vitamins, minerals, and antibodies that help your baby's immune system. It's often called liquid gold because of its rich golden color and valuable benefits. So this was something I learned from one of our OBs as well, about the value of it, right? And not everyone has to do it. If you didn't do it, that's okay. But it's going to be something I do again for the second pregnancy. And essentially what I would do I think you start producing it at like 20 weeks, 16, 20 weeks. I'll have to look that up. But I probably didn't do it till like 36 weeks, where I would pick our TV show of the day and I would basically self-express and then get a little bit of colostrum into a spoon. And like when I say a little bit, like all I could reduce in maybe 15 minutes of self-expressing was like a spoonful or half a spoonful. And I would do it on both sides and I would slowly fill up like 2 little salsa cups, like is all I really had at the end. It ended up being a really good thing for me because at the hospital after, I'll get to this too, but after my epidural, I ended up having to have a blood patch. And so it was a really hard night where they didn't want me to move much. And so they ended up giving Sierra some of my colostrum right off the bat. So that ended up being a really cool way to supplement with it. I'd been told it's really good to save for their first colds or when they need an extra boost, but I ended up using all of it in the hospital and it allowed me to sleep a little longer or not have to stress about breastfeeding. Like I got to skip one feed as well. It ended up being a big thing for me and something I'm going to do for this next one. The final countdown. So let's start with you, Lisa. You've had 2 final countdowns. One was, I don't know when the heck I'm going into labor. And the other was, I know the exact time and date and I will have a child by this time. What was the last few weeks like for both of your pregnancies?
It was, it was so crazy because like with Hannah, it was like, I felt like a ticking time bomb. Like you were talking about last week or one of the times when we would go for walks and it was like, is my water going to break in the forest? Like while we're walking or what's going to happen? Right. You feel like at any time it can just go like that. And it was, so it was very like, okay, I'm not going to pack my hospital bag because if I do that, then the baby's going to know to come. So I waited as long as I could on that. And just a caveat on that, I mean, I'm not an expert. I don't know. But for first pregnancy, like typically you're going to have enough time of contractions and they don't want you to go to the hospital right away anyways. The 5-1-1 rule is how I've heard it. I know other people have different numbers, but where you have, 5 minutes apart, contractions 5 minutes apart, duration of 1 minute and for 1 hour is when you go to the hospital is the one that I've read it's others 5-1-2 for 2 hours, whatever. Anyway, so you have time to pack that hospital bag while you're like suffering through these contractions as well. So don't panic about that. I probably finally packed my bag like 10 days before I was due. And then the night before I ended up going into labor, I was having contractions and they were full on contractions. They weren't Braxton Hicks because they were timed. Like I timed them and they just didn't last like for an hour. Like they do that, then they go away for an hour, then they come back for an hour. Like it was it was wild. And it was like, okay, they went away. What's going to happen with Aubrey? So we didn't really go into my story of my placenta previa. So I still was having placenta previa where they were like, okay, you're going to deliver at 36 weeks. And of course, you're Googling a lot, like, okay, what does placenta previa mean? What is, I could bleed out. That's really terrifying. I don't know what's going on. Why is this happening to me? Is the baby okay? All this stuff. So we get to our 32 weeks, we scheduled when we were going to have our C-section, and we scheduled it right at 36 weeks to make sure that I didn't go into labor and then, a bleeding episode could happen and whatever. So we go to our 34-week scan and they're like, your placenta previa is gone. You are totally normal. Everything's great. You're going to be fine. And I was like, excuse me? Like the ultrasound tech, like we say they're not supposed to tell you stuff like the doctor's supposed to, but you could tell she was like glowing. She was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. You're okay. This is okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Right. So, we're 2 weeks before we're supposed to have this baby for Aubrey. And they are like, oh, by the way, let's push out, another 3 weeks. We'll have you have the baby at 39 weeks instead. So I was like, already like anticipating. I was excited. With the date we picked for the 36 weeks. And then it was like, oh, just kidding. You got to wait another 3 weeks. I was like, oh, geez, I was ready. Let's go. Let's get this baby going. So with Hannah, so I had the full experience. I didn't have my water didn't break. So that wasn't a thing for me. She was 6 days. She was delivered 6 days before our due date, which was awesome. I didn't have to wait like you guys. You guys waited so long. I can't imagine. And then Aubrey, I was in Flagstaff. They don't allow you to have a vaginal birth after having had a C-section. So if I wanted to do that, I would have had to go down to Phoenix. But as we'll talk about in my birth story, I didn't believe that it would happen for me anyway. So fine with me. And my sister-in-law had scheduled C-sections, and she's like, it's amazing. You show up, they get you in an hour after getting to the hospital. You get the baby out within like 10, 20 minutes. And there you go, you're done. And I was like, I mean, can it be that easy? It was that easy. It was awesome. We'll talk about that later on, but I don't want to give away all of my birthing story. So we'll just stop there.
Yes, don't give us all your secrets yet. Got to play hard to get. Keep us coming back. For me, just looking at your notes here, Michelle, yes, I had lightning crotch. And yes, that's the medical term for it, lightning crotch. I'm like, there's not a nicer name. And they're like, no. Yeah, just basically it is what it sounds like, this pain, this very sharp pain in your crotch area. So that was fun. I didn't have Braxton Hicks until like around Weston's due date, and he did not show up on his due date. It was about 5 days later. I was scheduled on the 13th actually of March for an induction, but I had started going into labor naturally at that point. I didn't know at the time, but Weston had flipped the other way. So sunny side up, I guess is what they call it. And I was having really bad back labor. And my doctor, they didn't want us to come in until our contractions were like 2 minutes apart, like less than 5, but almost 3 to 2 minutes apart for a whole hour. But at that point, it was just like I was having such, like my back felt like it was, I've had back issues since a teenager, and like that going out, like catching feeling, that's kind of what my contractions, I don't know what a normal contraction feels like, because that's what my contractions felt like a really bad back pain. But up until that point, I felt good. My stomach, like I said, Braxton Hicks, where it would tighten up and then loosen. And then my students, my due date was on the 5th, and I showed up the next day, and they're like, why are you still here? I guess they were ready to have a sub. And they're like, I feel like they were making a birthing plan for me. They're like, what if your water breaks here in class? I'm like, then it breaks in class.
That's in all the movies.
Are you going to be grossed out? Yes.
It's in all the movies.
What is it, like 10%?
Where the water breaks. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you're instantly in pain. Like, don't watch the movies. That's not how it goes. Sometimes maybe, but I feel like that's what I expected to. And then, yeah, they were like, well, we'll grab the car. We'll walk. I'm like, no, I'm going to call an ambulance or just my husband. I won't need to go to the hospital. I'm like, don't worry about me. Just worry about yourselves. Get yourself to class on time. Yeah. So it was fun.
So one of the things that I go back to, Lisa, you had said that the baby comes when you've nested and you've prepared everything. I did not stop working at all, similar to Danielle, and up past my due date. And I remember the doctor finally scheduled an induction for me. And I had told my boss, like, I'll just work that day. The induction's not until 7:00 at night. And she's like, relax, take the day off. And I was like, but for me, like my mind was so all over the place and I just needed to keep myself busy during the last couple of weeks. I similarly experienced some of the same things that Lisa did where, I had that dark time, reached out to the doulas for a lot of counsel and support, being like, what the heck did I do? I'm terrified. I have no idea why I made this lifelong commitment. Like, did I just destroy my life? So I really needed to keep myself busy those last couple of weeks. I only had lightning crotch once, and I vividly remember I texted Lisa and Michelle, and it was like, what the heck is this? This is miserable. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend. I'm so glad I only had it the one time, because for people who have it constantly, I am so sorry. It is just a horror. If you're not uncomfortable enough at 38 weeks pregnant, let's just, throw this on top of it. And I hope for everybody's sake that you don't have it, but I know that you guys had it quite a bit.
I feel like Weston would kick. So I know he was upside down. I feel like he would kick. So I would have acid reflux, and then I feel like his head hit my crotch, and I'm like, it was the worst. I'm like, come on, we got to get the ball rolling here, bud.
I was going to say, to put it into words, it's like zing, like it like zings you, like you're like, oh gosh, like an electric shock. Like, and I was mid conversation the one time I had it, I was like, ah, and the person was like, are you all right? I was like, oh my gosh, that was not enjoyable.
Yeah, I remember I like keeled over. I was like, ugh. Like,
right.
What happened?
Same.
What was that?
And for me, like, that's like what made the last 4 weeks just mentally agony in my mind. Because it was like, you get to like 36 weeks-ish and you're like, my life is going to change any day or a month from now. And that's like a long, different period of time. And in between that month, you're working, you're trying to, keep your life together and keep it moving. Because if you slow down, then it's going to be worse. Then you're navigating lightning crotch in front of work conversations or wherever it is. It's just a lot. And, you're just like, when is my life going to change and this next phase going to start? Because, actually, as my mom had a nice quote that really helped me during this phase, which was, babies are a lot easier to take care of inside of you than out. So that was helpful because like the second they're out. Like they're ready to party, say goodbye to sleep in the next chapter. But it's obviously why we're all here, and it's an excitement that starts. But I think for me, it was wild. It was probably around 37 weeks. I don't know, Lisa, Leah, and a group of our friends, we started like a daily text. We're like, any action over there? And, in retrospect, that probably made it worse because it was like weeks of no action. And then one time I think it was 3 times I had full on contractions that it lasted like 3 to 4 hours and then just disappeared. So again, it was tonight, my life's going to change, like all these things. And another plus for the doulas, because like I would have gone to the hospital 3 times had I not known the drill. But it was pretty crazy. So anyways, towards the end too, I was doing all the induction techniques because we're all about the same boat. We were all about 5 days, 6 days late, drinking raspberry tea for every chance I could, dates, birthing balls. I pumped or was doing the colostrum harvesting. And then the things that I think actually, who knows, may have helped, because the day after I used evening Primrose Oil as a recommendation from the doulas, which is truly, you take a pill, you sterilize a needle, you poke a hole in the needle, and you stick it up your vagina as a way to open your cervix. And I did that the night before I went to labor. And then the next day I got acupuncture at like 2 p.m. and my water broke at 4 p.m. So these are not science-based, but they actually are. Well, who knows? We're not doctors. I'm not telling you to do this, but there are articles out there about kind of the values of this, because that's one of the things I loved about our doulas is anything they recommended was a science-backed approach. And so that's just the things that ended up getting me to the end, 41 weeks.
Did anyone else try any techniques?
I did not do the evening Primrose Oil, but I said earlier, I tried everything else.
Yeah, I tried spicy food. There was a bunch of things that bouncy ball, the walking uneven, didn't work for me.
Yeah, I don't think I still wasn't ready like when I went into labor. So we didn't try anything because I was like, I don't want this to happen. I'm not ready. So I like did all the anti stuff. Like I tried not to do anything that would put me into labor because I was scared. But
That's
it happened
totally
anyway.
fair.
So maybe that's why she came, because I was like, no, I'm terrified of you.
Ready or not, here I come.
You're very patient, which hopefully I get and I learn from you.
I was very attached to the idea of Weston's due date. I loved the date that he was due. So I was telling myself that was when he was going to come. He was going to come on his due date. And I was actually interviewing for the job that I have now. And they had called me and said, hey, we want to interview you on February 22nd. And I was like, well, that's my due date. So could we go any earlier? And the recruiter called me back and she's like, we can interview you on February 21st. Does that make you feel any better? I was like, yeah, sure. What's one day? And I remember being so nervous that I was going to go into labor in the interview. And my boss loves to tell me, she's like, it was so awkward. She's like, you were the most pregnant person I've ever interviewed in my life. And we couldn't say anything about it. We couldn't acknowledge it. I was like, well, the elephant in the room. At least I did not go into labor while in the interview, but I was very nervous that was going to happen.
Just a reminder, you had me convinced you were going at least a month early, if not 6 weeks early. You were dead set you were going early. And so I lost the baby pool because of you, and I would like my money back.
Well, we thought that we would because of our diagnosis. We were pretty confident that we would go early and also in the third trimester, we ended up in the hospital twice. And the first time that I was in the hospital, I was measuring full contractions. And that was at 30 weeks. So we were really nervous. And actually, I think that's part of the thing that made the last couple of weeks so hard, because we were so scared of anything happening and sending us into labor that early that we went on this, after we visited the hospital and had to go do that, we were in the hospital twice in 1 week. We went on a lockdown where we did not go hang out with people because we didn't want to get sick. I didn't go on long walks because we were having a horrendous winter and I didn't want to slip on ice and something happen. And so the last little bit of our pregnancy was hard on that aspect too, because I also started working remote. Exclusively because my doctor didn't want me changing an elevation and going into labor early, which can happen. And I was working an hour away from where we currently live and dropping 2,000 feet in elevation every day when I would drive to work. And so I started working exclusively remotely. I don't think I left the house for 3 weeks at a time, maybe longer than that. And so that was also a challenge there.
I remember you going stir crazy.
Yeah. And that was why I wanted to keep working too, because at least it gave me a chance to be on meetings and socialize with people in some capacity. It felt kind of like COVID days all over again because I was on a quarantine at home. But that was really just to make sure that Weston would keep growing and that we would, that he was protected. And like Lisa says, it's a blip on the radar now. It was, handful of weeks that I didn't even remember until we just started talking about it at this point. So yeah, the end of that pregnancy was really tough for those reasons. Yeah. And then actually Bryce, Michaela's husband, won the pool and he was still a week earlier than Weston's actual date that he was born.
Up here, they don't let you go past 41 weeks because of the elevation. They say the placenta just deteriorates so fast up here. Is what I asked about it, and that's what they said is it just gets really bad. So they want to make sure that baby is healthy and gets out by 41 weeks. So yeah, you two butt right up against that number.
Us three, everyone went late. So moral of the story: this is not gambling advice, but if you're ever in a baby pool, take the over. We used an app called Baby Bookie, which was really fun. If you want to look it up, it's just the coolest little app that you can. We can send it to all our people across the country and they can submit their guesses of the due date. And that was really fun. But just like you, Leah, no one even came close. Everyone was far earlier than the due date or than her actual birthday.
As Weston kept getting later and later, I kept hoping that there was going to be overlap between our hospital stays and that we could like have
Yes.
lunch in the hallway, because
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh.
okay, maybe Weston and Sierra will be born on days close to each other.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Because I was thinking about that when Danielle said they did a hospital tour, because I didn't. But then when we brought you lunch that day, I got to see what it was like. And I remember saying to the nurses on my way out, I was like, I'll see you any day now. It was a whole week later, but I was really hoping they'd overlap too. Should we focus on our hot topic and wrap up for the day? We've got, we've just talked about going into labor. Now we're fast forwarding a whole year later. We've got basically someone who's about to be one this week, the week after, and in the week following. And so I think all of us are going through this transition of getting off of formula and the bottle and onto milk and into solids. And, for Leah, slopping breastfeeding. So I want to start there. What's going through your mind? How are you doing?
I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll tell you that. So I will lean on your guys' advice for sure, because I don't know how to stop. Steven said the other day, he's like, you're going to cry when you stop. And I think I have worked through that grieving process already, because when I was in the hospital sick in November, I was there for 4 days. And because of the medication that they had me on, I had to pump and dump for the days that I was there and then the subsequent 10 days afterwards. And I didn't know if I was going to get my supply back or be able to continue breastfeeding at that point. And I honestly, it was like the second day that I was there that I cried to every nurse who came in and was like working through the grieving process then of stopping without having planned to, without having want to, but being forced to stop. And so I was really lucky. My supply didn't decrease. I was able to keep it going, and I was able to, continue breastfeeding. And when I say breastfeeding, in my experience, it's exclusively pumping. I think it's important to throw that definition out there, because depending on what you see on social media, some people just say breastfeeding is only when the baby is on the breast. And I don't like to interject my opinions on a lot of things, but I so strongly disagree with that. I think that women who exclusively pump, or who do a mix, a combo feed, any of that, that's all still considered breastfeeding. All that to be said, here I am. And I guess I made the decision about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, that I was going to stop when Wesson turned 1. I have no idea how to approach it. I have heard that you put cabbage leaves in your bra and it dries you up very quickly. So I will try that. Against Steven's well wishes. He's like, you're going to walk around with vegetables on your boobs? I'm like, I am.
And cabbage of all things. Doesn't smell the best, but...
That's interesting, because cabbage leaves are supposed to help you not... I can understand that, because I read about that. Or also when I got a lump, because I was backed up, they have you do that so that you don't get whatever it's called, metastasis, whatever. So that's interesting. I shared with you how I went off of breastfeeding. You eliminate a pump, and then you pump for less time, and then you eliminate another one 2 to 3 days later. Mine ended fast. I didn't even make it a week and it was done. So yeah, it was very emotional for me to stop, because I also stopped for selfish reasons, in that I wanted to get pregnant again. So
I say I'm not going to get emotional, but I probably will. And it's also just been such a big part of my life for the last year. So much time invested in it. What I'm going to do after my last pump is I'm going to do the report on my Spectra. That'll tell me how many hours I've spent pumping.
Ooh, yes, that's cool.
And
that's
curious. Only going to show me from the Spectra. It's not going to show me from the Elvie, which is, I would say it's probably a 50-50 split of which I use, especially once I started going back to work. So and I think the Elvie does tell you. I'm just really technologically illiterate. So I'm sure somebody who knows how to work technology can figure it out. So I'm curious to see how many hours I've spent. And I just don't I don't know. It's just been such a big part of my life. I feel like it's going to be really a weird transition, but we're going on 2 trips coming up. And I'm like, I don't want to, this past weekend, I packed my pump. I took everything I had down to Phoenix. And I was like, I won't miss that. I won't miss the traveling with all of the accoutrements.
And the cleaning.
Yeah, there's so much that's so great that when you stop, you're like, what do I do with all this time on my hands? This is amazing. Or like you start, I didn't sleep for a while still because I was obsessed with checking the camera to make sure that she was still breathing. But, in theory, you start sleeping better. There's going to be a lot of benefits to it.
Leah, like, that is so impressive. A whole year. You should be so proud of yourself. Like, that gift you've given to Wesson for all this time is just remarkable. And I'm impressed and in awe of you every day.
Thank you for those kind words. It never bothered me. It like never got in the way of my life. And I did tell Lisa this earlier this week. I think it's because of the Elvie, because I had the hands-free pump. Like, because I literally have, I don't know how many meetings I've been on with our corporate teams and my personal teams, and they have no idea that I've been pumping the entire time. So it really didn't cause a disruption to my life. I think if I did not have that, I don't know that I would have made it as long as I did. So that was a huge thing for me. I do think that that's one of the things that got me to where I am.
That's an amazing thing, and hopefully we'll cover that in an episode, because like where I work now, there's nowhere for me to pump. But it's just, like I said, I work at a nonprofit. It's you make do with what you do. But I was pumping today, and 2 different guys walked in to get their paychecks, and I was like, I don't mind, but I know you're really. They were both so uncomfortable, and I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, like this stinks. And I could see where that definitely discourages. Like if you listen to our moms talk about it, our moms were like, I went back to work and it wasn't like it is today. Like I couldn't just keep pumping at work. Like that just didn't happen. And they had hand expressing pumps and non-automated pumps. It's amazing. It's amazing. Even today's day and age, like how to get it to a year, Leah, is amazing. So do you guys have plans for your solids milk, getting rid of milk transition or moving to cow's milk? Do you guys have plans for that at all?
Personally, I have no plans. I've read hundreds of articles at this point. I'm not sure. So if anyone has magic tricks, I'll probably still be navigating this when this podcast gets released. My only strategy has been, our pediatrician recommends trying to get down to, somewhere around 10 ounces of milk and switching from formula to cow's milk around 12 months. And so I've been trying to decrease her formula intake by an ounce every week. Actually, Leah was inspiring me to do a lot of this too. And so trying to reduce the bottle amount, which is what we're navigating, but like I'm not seeing her pick up the solids with the ratio I'm decreasing the milk. And so there's another approach of cold turkey. There's so many things to navigate. Yeah. And so the other thing is like, we're still navigating getting Sierra into like a perfect sleep rhythm. So, I'm worried too about the days we don't give her enough food that she might wake up. Right. And so that's just, again, all these mom questions going through my head. I'm just right now just trying to let her lead. I'm not trying to put too much pressure on myself. Like, I feel like if we're not completely switched over by 12 months, even 13 months, I think it's going to be okay. It's going to sort itself out. So I'm not putting too much stress on myself, letting her do her thing, but kind of literally trying to listen to her and what she needs right now.
My sister-in-law did bottles all the way through past 18 months with her youngest. They continue bottles, and we'd stopped bottles at the week before her first birthday, and we went straight to cups with straws and only those and no bottles. And Hannah did not like cow's milk. We would give it to her. We would send it to school and it would always come back full. And we were like, are you guys not giving her the bottle? They're like, no, she just doesn't like it. She doesn't take it. So we asked the pediatrician. The pediatrician's like, if you can get the calcium elsewhere, it's fine. So we supplemented with cottage cheese and yogurt. And she had servings of those every single day. There's no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it, even though Google tells you so.
I haven't even looked it up. Don't even know where to start. And you said 10 ounces, and I'm shocked because Weston eats 9 ounces first thing in the morning. Then he eats a full breakfast of like eggs, a whole banana, and like yogurt. So I don't even know what I'm doing, to be honest.
A whole banana?
Yeah, a whole banana. This boy eats, and he still don't gain weight as like he should. He's tall and skinny.
Hannah was the same. Hannah was like, she would eat like 4 bananas a day if you'd let her eat that much. Like at that point, at a year old, she was obsessed with bananas. But Michelle, I know we talked about this before. Like Hannah still to this day will come back, and every single snack and meal that we send to school will come back full. She hasn't touched a thing. And then the next day she eats everything, and I'm convinced she steals other kids' food too, because she was so hungry. And she ebbs and flows like that, and she's over 2 years old. And like I said, I talked to the pediatrician. They're like, it's so normal. It's so normal of them figuring it out. And I was always concerned. I'm like, oh, I'm not giving her the right foods. I should be giving her a different kind of food. She's not into that kind of food. You know, you change things up. We're terrible about giving vegetables. Like all of these things where you're like reeling, like, I'm not doing it right. Why am I not doing it right? What's happening? What's wrong with me that I'm not doing it right? They're figuring it out. And like my doctor said, they won't let themselves starve unless they're, super sick, and you would probably know if they're starving.
Yeah. Well, my daughter's diet consisted, the only thing we get her each day was popcorn. And so she's fully eating popcorn, doesn't choke on it. I just, it's pretty impressive. And so that, it's the one thing we'll get her to eat, and she'll pound it. So that was her diet today. So yeah, exactly. It's just, and then she came back iron deficient that, one appointment. So it's just these things that spiral. Like, how do you make sure she's healthy enough? And it's tricky when like you want to believe that it's all going to sort itself out. And then you have a day like today when she has so much diarrhea. I'm like, why is she not feeling well and so upset? I'm like, what can I change in her diet to help her feel better and pivot? So just trying to take it day by day. And we're probably going to give our pediatrician another call today and tomorrow, and just try to figure out the best way to start testing a few things. So we'll see. Leah, how's your transition going?
Yeah, I'm completely overwhelmed. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I went to pick up Wes today, and his teacher said, yeah, he was a little fussy today. He wasn't very happy. Like, it was kind of a rough day for him. And I was like, okay, well, did he eat like a bunch? And she's like, yeah, he ate most of his lunch. And I was like, okay. And she's like, and he ate his snack this afternoon and his snack this morning. I'm like, okay. So I get home and I unpack his lunchbox. Almost his entire lunch is in there. And I'm like, okay. Like, I made these banana oat bars yesterday. And Wesson loves bananas as well. Like, so everything I make has banana in it, pretty much. I made these banana oat bars, and I gave him one that was like, I don't know, 2 inches by 2 inches long and wide. And I was like, oh, he must have eaten his entire muffin. No, the entire thing was still there. So I was like, I don't know who describes this as he's eaten his entire lunch, but it's not me. And I was like, okay, I think that a characteristic that he's had since birth is that he will choose sleep over food. And I think that is still ringing true, except for when he was first born, and we can go into that, and we had feeding issues there. He's never given us cues that he's hungry. I've found myself conceding on things because I just want him to eat. And like tonight I had a pasta for him, and he took all of it with his hand, pulled it over the side of his tray, looked for the dogs, and then just dropped it and looked at me and smiled. I'm like, oh, sweet. Thank you. And he did that with the entire meal, the whole serving of pasta. I was like, okay, well, I guess you're not going to eat this. And so then I just like conceded, and I've got some quinoa, and he loves quinoa. And so I threw the quinoa at him, and then I gave him some cheese as well. And I was like, okay, well, as long as you eat something, I guess. I've given him some cow's milk, but like 3-4 ounces maybe in a day. I don't know how we make the full transition. I'm very, very overwhelmed by it.
Well, at least we're all overwhelmed together. No good solutions. Besides, I think the rumor is they all get through this transition, but maybe that's like, if I had to describe parenthood in the first year in 2 words, it's logistics and transitions. Like, it's just constantly, especially when breastfeeding and pumping, it's like, logistically, where will I be at this time? Do I have the right pieces? Do I have this, and this? And like, where will I be? Well, like, Do I need to bring a cover up? It's just like all these logistics. And then the transitions, like as soon as you get comfortable, don't, because it's on to the next thing.
It gets easier. And especially when they start communicating with you more, like Hannah, we're starting to like, she'll tell you, you know, and not like obviously, and it gets better.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cool. Well, we'll have to update on how you guys transitioned away and as we, you know, they get older and everything like that. So,
and Leah's pumping count. I'm so curious.
Yeah.
To wrap us up, you know, thanks for joining us today on our conclusion of our pregnancy episodes. Please give us a follow anywhere you listen to podcasts and rate us. That would be awesome. We're going to looking for listener questions. So email us at hello@momjeansthepodcast.com or find us on Instagram and TikTok at momjeanstthepodcast. We're also on X and YouTube. We're all the places now. So come find us. We'd love to connect with you.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening.